when you have two dogs that can look almost identical in shape, they can look like they can have the same measurements. They can have same chest circumference, same neck circumference, same neck to withers measurement. But where the real difference starts to show up is in the front chest site area. So I'm going to take a look at some photographs here just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. Let's take a look at these two dogs here. So in principle, you look at these two dogs, obviously they are completely different breeds. We've got a French Bulldog on the left and a Whippet on the right. And the real difference here is obvious when you look at them. The height's different, everything looks different. But the really surprising thing is that their actual measurements, when you're measuring them for a pattern, are really similar. So if we take a look at, first of all, let's take a look at this measurement here. If I drew an imaginary line down from the bottom of their neck down to where the bottom of their chest meets, that's where the X is here. If I drew that imaginary line and then took a measurement from behind those front paws to that point X, that measurement is actually the same between these two dogs. So that front length there is really similar. That's kind of where that front chest movement of those legs are. Very much the same. If I look at the neck to withers measurement, so you take the neck measurement, the neck to withers measurement from where the collar would normally sit on the neck of a dog, and then you go down to that imaginary line that you draw up from behind their front legs to where their shoulders are, which is shown by the X on these pictures. If I measure that distance on these two dogs, it's actually the same measurement. So again, if I took that measurement and looked at my pattern and thought, yeah, this is the same size pattern. Another one that really throws this off is the chest circumference. If I took that measurement at the widest point of the chest on both of these dogs, that measurement is actually the same measurement. So it's really surprising because all of these measurements are indicating that you're working with the same size pattern. But the real difference is this front height on the dog. So take a look at this measurement here. I've got a line down along the bottom that is showing where the bottom of the chest is. And then I've got another line that shows where the bottom of their neck is, or just underneath their face. And look at the difference there in that height. This is the front height on a dog, and it's quite different. And this is where you need to start changing measurements on your pattern. The thing about patterns that you buy, when you're buying a pattern, normally you are measuring the neck circumference, the chest circumference, and that back length. Those, as you just saw on those images, are fairly similar. We didn't look at the back length, and the back length for sure is a little bit longer on the Whippet, but that's not something that is typically taken into account when you're looking at a size for your pattern, because that is so easily to adjust. But that chest circumference, that is one of the key measurements that everybody tells you to measure when you're trying to figure out what size to work with. So if you took that size, let's say it was a medium, and you made that dog coat for either one of these dogs, it would fit the dogs completely differently because of that front height measurement. So let me go back to these pictures here. Take a look at the shape of the chest on these dogs. As you can see on the Bulldog, the French Bulldog on the left, their chest shape is quite square. It's barrel shaped. They're called like a barrel shaped dog. If we look at the Whippet on the right, their chest shape is oval shaped, or a deep chested dog. And so this is where things start to really, this is where you can kind of recognize when you look at a dog and you see the shape of that chest, you know there's a big difference there, and you really need to start to account for that difference when you're making your patterns. Again, if we look at the front of these dogs, you really start to see the difference here. The French Bulldog on the left has the really wide chest compared to the Whippet on the right. And as you can see, the chest shape is a shaped chest. And the whippet on the right is this oval or deep chested shape on the dog. So this is where things really start to show up on your pattern. And one of the things that is really important when you're taking this into account, as I said, is to try to figure out what is the shape of your dog first before you start working on the patterns. So this here is a standard dog. It's a Labrador, let's say, or a Retriever. These are standard shaped dogs. They have a round shaped chest. And honestly, this is what most patterns are made for. And as you can see, as I've shown you in the other illustrations, if you made your pattern for this size dog or this shape of a chest, it's not going to fit the other kind of dogs. If we look at the Dalmatian, which is closest to like the Whippet kind of thing, you can see it's got this really deep oval shaped chest. It's much deeper than it is wider. And again, if we look at the side of it, it's also oval shaped, and it has a very long front height from the neck, underneath the dog's neck, all the way down and between the front legs. That's really long. And if we went back to the standard size dog here, if we took that same measurement, this measurement is going to be a lot shorter on that dog. And the last one I want to show you is the French Bulldog, and this barrel chest. As you can see, it's quite square. It's barrel shaped on the front and it's square on the side view. And again, that really does dictate how the shape of your pattern needs to work. How this comes into play with the pattern itself is that if it's too tight in this, let's go back to this one here. If it's too tight in this area here, if you don't account for this long front height, what's going to happen is it's going to bunch up in the front. All of the coat's going to be too tight in here. And what happens is that when there is tension in a coat, i.e. it's too small for the dog, it's going to pull into that direction. So what happens is as the dog starts moving, the coat starts pulling towards the front legs or the front chest area, and it starts bunching up here. It'll pinch underneath in behind the legs of the dog probably, and it starts shifting on the back because everything's moving forward. It's no longer balanced on the dog's body, so the back of the coat starts shifting side to side. It also is very uncomfortable, as I said. It'll start pinching in behind the legs on the dog, and it's bunching up here. And as I said in last week's live, when it's bunching up in the front here, what can happen is it'll start matting the dog's fur. Now, if you have a short-haired dog like a Whippet, that's not such a big deal. But if you have a longer-haired dog like the dog I talked about last week, it started matting. That when they had the wrong size dog coat, it started matting the fur on the dog. So these are the kind of things that you really need to account for when you are looking at your dog coats or the shape of the dog and the pattern. Let's go look at the overhead, and I'll show you what I would do to change this pattern in order to fit the dog a little better. So for the most part, you're not going to do a whole lot to the body. This is the body of the coat. This is the front portion of the coat that will wrap around the dog's front chest and legs, and then attach to the body of the coat. So if I look at this coat as an actual coat here, I'll just show you again how this works. So flip it over this way so it'll match. Now this coat is obviously a whole lot bigger than the coat pattern that I have, but I can still match up these pieces so you have a sense of how it all goes together. So this is your chest pattern piece, and you may be working with a different a different pattern entirely, but I want to give you an idea of just how you look at pattern pieces and how you can adjust them. So this is what covers the chest portion of the dog. And as this pattern works, it attaches to the back portion, which is right here. So this would attach there. And then these two pieces attach and they wrap underneath the dog's front chest area and wrap in behind the front legs on the dog, and they attach on the side with some Velcro. So that's how this pattern works. I'll just quickly show you roughly how this pattern would line up with the dog's body. So if we had the dog here, that would be the back, the main portion of the body. This portion attaches here and it goes on the front chest of the dog. And then this portion here would wrap underneath the legs and wrap up to the side of the dog. So let's just let's take a look at this dog here too. So one of the things that we looked at in those photographs is that front height and also the front chest width. So if we imagined that dog, the Whippet, for example, they had a really, really long front height. You would measure that from the underneath where the collar would normally sit on a dog, go running down through the front legs to the widest point on the chest of the dog. And so that measurement on a Whippet is going to be way longer. If you recall that photograph that I showed you, the Whippet's length from where the neck started to underneath the, where the widest point on the chest of the dog was very long compared to that French Bulldog. That measurement for the French Bulldog is way shorter. The other thing that you're really going to be looking at here is that chest width, and that is the distance between the front legs. If you look at that front picture, remember the picture that I showed you of the two dogs side by side? If I had that measurement on the Bulldog that went across there, remember that square shape on it, and it was super wide. That distance on the Bulldog is going to be way wider than the Whippet. The Whippet was much slimmer. So that really affects the full, the way that you deal with that chest portion of the pattern. If I wanted to adjust these pattern pieces, if I was going to be working with the Bulldog, I would be slicing this and spreading it. I would change the width of this. I would take that measurement on my dog and find the widest width across here on the dog from where the front legs are, the widest width across, and I would take that measurement and then I would compare that to the measurement that I have on the front chest. Now this particular pattern is made on the fold, so I would take that measurement that I did on my dog and I would divide it in half, and then I would look and see how that compares to the width of the widest point on my pattern. Now just remember, when you do this and you take that measurement on the dog, you don't want to make it exactly the same measurement. You want to give a little bit of ease. You want to have some movement in there. One of the tricks that I often will do is I'll put a couple of fingers underneath that to kind of give it a little bit more of a little bit more measurement, a little bit more width or whatever it may be that you're taking, just to give it a little bit length, a little bit more ease on that. So again, you don't want to have this exactly the same width as what your dog measurement is, but you want to give that. That's where you're going to widen it. And I would just cut that pattern over here and I would spread it open, add a little bit more paper in there, and then you've got a nice wide chest on that. The other thing that you want to look at is that front height. So on this particular pattern, this portion here is what sits underneath the dog's neck right there. And then this portion runs through the front legs on that dog and wraps around their legs onto their side like that. So if that distance here is too short, it's not going to fit your dog properly. It's going to be really tight, as I was explaining in those photographs. It's going to pull all the coat up and start bunching up into this area here. It'll pinch in behind the front legs and it's going to be bunching all up in this chest area here. And it'll start twisting side to side on the back end. So what you would be doing if you were trying to increase that front height is you would cut across the pattern here and you would lengthen that. So I would spread this, I would cut it, I would spread it open, and I would add some extra paper in there to give it some extra height. This is your overall front height measurement. As I told you, if we took a front height measurement, we take from the collar and we run to the widest point on the dog's chest. That is the front height. And that should match generally. You're going to give it a little bit of ease, of course, but that should match this measurement on my pattern. But if I was going to be changing this pattern for the whippet, I'm going to definitely want to increase that front height. So you may want to balance that. You may want to have that so that you've got a little bit added here and a little bit added here. But the main thing that you would be doing there is figuring out where the withers are on that dog. And the way you figure out the withers is you take an imaginary line up from behind their front legs and you'll see those bones on the back of their spine there. That's their shoulder blades and that's where the legs pivot from. So that's their withers, and you take a measurement from where the collar would normally sit on the dog to where that withers is. And that helps you to determine where that piece here that wraps behind the front legs, that helps you to determine where this sits. So if this withers was really far back, that means that this piece has to sit further back. So you may increase this length here, or you may find that you're going to increase this length here. There's a lot of things that you can do to adjust that pattern so that it fits that front height on a dog. And I can go into those details, and I do go into those details quite a bit in the Custom Fit Toolkit, which I'll put a link down to below in the description. And that is a kit that I have that you can learn how to change all of these different things on any kind of a pattern. So that's probably enough description right now about how you would adjust that pattern. But again, you can adjust the width by slicing it and then just spreading it here. And then you can adjust the height by adding a little bit more here. Again, you'd slice it and spread it open, or you may slice it and then tighten it up. If you had a dog that had a very short front height, you may be tightening this up. But there's a lot of places where you can cut that. You can cut it here, or you could cut it right down here on those dotted lines and shrink it or spread it in both of those places. And that if you did that here, that's going to change that distance in there. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how you can go about changing your patterns. If you have any questions on how you go about changing these patterns, just feel free to add a comment down below in the comments down below, or in the description you'll find my email, and you can just send me the photos of the pattern that you've been working on, or if you've actually made a dog coat and it doesn't fit, by all means send those photos along, and I would like to see a front picture of it, a side picture of it, an overhead picture, as many pictures as you can send me, and I can usually help you troubleshoot where you might want to be looking at changing the shape of that pattern. But again, the key message that I want to just really get through here is that shape of the chest makes all the difference to how that pattern is going to fit your dog. Any questions at all, by all means, put them down below. Send me an email. I love to hear from you, so please feel free to interact with me in any way that works for you. I will be back next week, so make sure you follow this channel, subscribe so you get alerted when I do go live. And until then, I hope you guys have a great week, and we'll talk to you later. Okay, bye-bye.